I'm live. Make sure you can all see me and hear me. One, can you hear me? One, can you hear me? It's not coming through here. Sorry, I'm just checking a few things because it's using the wrong external microphone is the input. Output is the headphones. That's perfect. External microphone doesn't sound particularly good. Oops, not yet. Anyway, can you guys hear me? Please check. Howdy from the East Coast. Hi, Lisa. Looking at everything we have here, checking it all out. Can you hear me okay? Everybody, please let me know if you can hear me okay. The camera's actually over here, but my test screen is over here. And yes, can hear you fine. Excellent. Excellent. So I've got this for my questions, so I don't have to be. So anyway, let me sit back here, get comfortable, and welcome you all once again to our weekly gathering for Satsang. And it's always a pleasure to come here and talk about truth, to talk about the nature of consciousness, to explore why we're here. I'm going to invite you all to, if you had a question when you came in, something that was rolling around in your mind, I'm going to invite you to, for a moment anyway, let go of all your questions and just sink into the pure experience of being. Just noticing that you're here, thoughts going around, there's sound happening, there's various kinds of sense experiences, there's feelings and the like. But let's try to take the mind offline while we're in satsang today. Let's not look for answers in knowledge. Instead, let's look for the answers in being. You know, in English, we only have one word for knowledge or knowing. In lots of languages, they have more than one. Like in Spanish, they have both conocer and saber, and it's a different kind of knowing. The kind of knowing I want us to experience is the kind of know, and it's interesting. Saber mean it comes to see, and sabe is to know. So it's a very interesting combination in saber, yeah, to see and to know. So it's a very interesting combination. Those words are so very, very close. In English, we only have one, but there's a very big difference between objective knowledge and existential knowledge. The one is a knowing, an intimate, personal, almost non-conceptual knowing. The other is a knowing about. There's a great example you can use. When I was living in Florida, at least once a year, on the other side of the state, in somewhere around St. Petersburg, I think, yeah, was the Salvador Dali Museum. Now, I'm a big fan of Salvador Dali, and it is the largest collection of his works this side of Barcelona, where he lived. And I went there probably every year for 10 years, even before they built this beautiful facility for it and the like. And I would just sit there and soak up what I was seeing in the picture. Like 6 of his 12 large format masterpieces are there. And I would just take it in. I would just sit there entranced, staring at it, just looking around it. Now, there's a lot of museums, and these have these too, that have tours, right? And some have your own tour, right? Where you buy this little thing and you put it in your ears and you walk around and it tells you about everything you're seeing. Now, when I'm just sitting there watching it, if somebody asked me, what was it I saw? I couldn't really tell them. What did you learn? Nothing. I was just sitting in the pure experience of it, which was unbelievably powerful, transformative, awe-inspiring. And as I was sitting there, tour groups would come by, and there would be the tour guide and explaining everything. And it was nice. It was nice to have that additional information, by pointing out some of the things in the picture that I hadn't seen. If that's all I ever experienced was a narrative about the painting, pointing out little details of where it came from, where the history and how he made it and where he was when he made it and all of that kind of stuff, which was interesting for sure. But if that's all I had gotten out of it, I wouldn't have actually experienced Dai. This is the difference between knowing about something and knowing something. We have intimate relationships. We want to go beyond knowing about somebody. You go out on dates and you find out what they did, what they do for a living, and where they've been, where they've lived, what they like, and all that kind of stuff. That's knowing about them. But intimacy is when it goes beyond knowing about, it becomes knowing. It's the experience of them energetically, the subtleties, the nuances that you just notice. Nobody showed them to you. It's not really about them. It is them. You're knowing all of the wondrous aspects of who they are. Just checking your show. So the difference then between the knowledge that is knowing about, Spanish is conocer, and sabe, the knowledge of knowing, is really like night and day. For the most part, when we look at ourselves and coming into a sense of our own self-knowledge, we've all been taught to think of ourselves as some kind of object that we know about. So if I ask you about yourself, you go, well, I'm this tall, and I'm this gender, and I live here, and I've done these things, and I really like this, and I really like that. It's a bit like going on a date with yourself in the beginning, and it's just a bunch of facts going back and forth. But the thing that's really going to bring you together, if it's going to go beyond a first or second date, is not the facts you're exchanging, but the energy that's going back and forth. And the same thing is true for us when we examine ourselves. We kind of limit our self-knowledge to what we know about ourselves, the colors I like, the places I like to go, the things I wish I could do, the things I wish I had, that sort of thing. Beyond that is a direct energetic experience of yourself. So when I invite you to put questions aside for a moment, of course, that's what we're here for, is to answer questions, but to put them aside for a moment, to just feel your own being, I'm inviting you into non-conceptual knowing, intimate knowing of yourself, a direct knowing that is the experience of your own existence. And the only mystery of non-duality is that the experience and the experiencer, when you're talking about genuine knowing, are not two. Non-duality, not two. They're one. Because you're not knowing about yourself like you're somebody over here, and then there's another you over here, having a conversation. The you you're knowing is the you who's doing the knowing. And so the knowledge then cannot be conceptual, it cannot be descriptive, it cannot be talking about thoughts and emotions and sensations. It's a direct line into the mysterious center of it all. And you are mysterious. When you actually take a moment to ponder your own being, this experience of existing, you find it to be utterly mysterious. And all of the explanations about the combinations of matter and all of that sort of stuff, they just kind of fall down. They just kind of go, they don't really cut the mustard as far as I'm concerned. Trying to explain this phenomena of self-aware consciousness as a bunch of molecules that have happened to gather in just such a way that they became self-aware, to me is self-evidently not true. And there's actually plenty of, the mystery of consciousness is still a huge mystery in science. They just kind of chalk it up to the emergent properties, the complexity of matter, which is really to say that they have no idea. No one has any idea where it came from. This is the essential mystery, and it will always be a mystery. Not mystery in that it can't be known. It's mystery in that it cannot be known objectively. You can never stand apart from yourself and know yourself as an object. So this way of knowing is non-objective. It is not a description of you, but the direct experience of you. And you're having this experience all the time. And because you are having that experience, and because it is your actual nature that we're talking about here, you are as qualified to know the truth of being as the most educated and intelligent scientist on the planet. And you don't need any special scriptures, you don't need any special books, you don't need any special gurus. The only thing a guru can do is point you here. Go there, look. Look for yourself. And then, after you've done that, see what questions arise. And if for some reason I don't get to your question today, take your question into that very same place, because that's what I do, right? Somebody asks me a question, I don't answer from my mind, I don't answer from past experience. It's an immediate arising right in this moment in response to your question. It is coming out of that place that is non-objective knowing. Because if it was objective knowing, I'd just be spewing a bunch of ideas and philosophies and the like. But when it's non-objective knowing, it's coming directly from the actual fact of you, which just happens to be the actual fact of me. Because in this essential place, we are one. There's not two of us here. And hello, everyone. So glad to have you here. So glad to see you. Hello from London, from Rob. True self emerging. Yes. No, you can't. You can't. I forgot to close the door, so the cat now wants attention on my lap. Lisa from the West Coast. Yeah, here it sound a bit hollow, so it must be coming from the wrong mic. So I either have the opportunity to hook up a different mic, or we just deal with it as it is. I have another mic operating another camera that I'm going to use for the excerpts. So hopefully the sound is good enough you can hear me. I don't really like to have it like this. Last week it worked absolutely perfectly. It is on, it is functioning. I don't know. Sorry. Let's see. Rob Rickery, bit of an echo. Yeah, hi G from QLD. You know what I could do? I could do this. I could actually just, oh, this is a bit crazy. Okay. I can just kind of put the laptop in my lap so that mic is closer to me. That could be, that would help it a bit, yeah? Yeah, that'll help it a bit. And I'll just look at the questions here rather than on the iPad. I had this kind of set up as a controller on the side. So let me scroll back and I'll just I'll do it all from here. It's probably sound a little bit better since my mouth is closer to the internal mic. Hi from QLD. Hi Meryl, so good to have you. Ava, namaste. You are heard well. Rosario from Spain. Great to be here from Inner Aesthetics. Great to have you, sir. Arby, what are your methods to clearing the mind and getting into the present moment? Well, it's a really good question. The number one thing I teach for that on that score is the practice of allowing, which is simply being present with whatever is happening without going into a story about it. Now, you are always present, obviously. Consciousness is always present. You are always aware. Things are always coming and going in your awareness. So when we're talking about being present or not being present, what we're talking about is how much of our attention is absorbed by the thinking process. How much of it is lost in thoughts about what's happening rather than directly experiencing what's happening. You know, the example I gave at the beginning when I was talking about the Dali Museum and looking at the paintings. The people who were in the tour group, I can't say for sure, but simply because you're paying attention to a narrative, you're learning about it, the focus of attention is on the thoughts about the object and not the object itself. So when the attention goes away from the narrative, the story, the description, the secondary stuff, and goes directly to the experience that's being had in that moment, you are now in what is called presence. That's what it is to be present. Now, oftentimes that's not easy for us to do. The reason being is because of, childhood traumas and difficulties. The present moment oftentimes holds a lot of tension in it, anxiety, a lot of stuff that we want to escape from. And we escape into our minds. We escape into the story of things rather than the actual direct experience of things. And this is a very powerful thing to recognize, because all the suffering is in our story about it. Let's say you're having some financial problems. Right? That's really not the best way to say it, because having financial problems is an interpretation of what you happen to be in this moment. In this moment, you are sitting somewhere, you're listening to me, you're breathing, you're aware of your existence, you have a certain amount of money in your pocket and a certain amount of money in the bank. That's it. Now that's what's actually happening. Now the mind could come into this, our thought process, and create a narrative about that. Well, that's the money. That's not enough money. This is really frustrating. You could do so much more if you had more money. What's the matter with you? Why can't you make more money? Why are you listening to this guy? He's got nothing to say. He's unimportant. You should be doing something much more useful. Now, all of those, I hope you can see, have nothing to do with the present moment. They're all interpretive of the present moment. And the interpretation that is dominant is the interpretation that's simply habitual. So somewhere along the line, the belief got put into place that you should be making more money, or you should have this much, and then the amount of money you make starts to represent some kind of a status within the community, and that should be important to you. And maybe you grew up in a culture who said making a lot of money is what you have to do. It's not about being happy, it's about being wealthy. Um, and you may have also grown up one that says it's not about you, that you shouldn't be pursuing wealth. Wealth is bad, and all of that. So I think you can get the picture that if you take all of that out, if you take all the narrative out, and you're simply present with what's happening, present. The moment you go off into the narrative, you're not present anymore. It's an example you've probably all heard me use many, many times. I'm just going to pull this out right. It's not working anyway. Example you've all heard me use many, many times, I'm sure, is that of you're walking someplace, like walking through a park and it's springtime, and suddenly there's this flower you see, and it catches your eye. And suddenly it's like, oh, there's this moment. I call it the power of wow, right? There's simply this moment when thought drops away and it's pure experience. In fact, you're not even there. There's no thought of you experiencing the flower. It's just all pure experience. It's consciousness, and consciousness is experience. Usually within a few seconds, unless you've really trained yourself to be mindful and present, within a few seconds, the mind starts up and says, wow, that's really beautiful. I've never seen that before. I wonder what kind of flower that is. God, it's really gorgeous. I think I'd like to give some of those to my girlfriend. I wonder where I can get them. I think I might have seen those on sale at Whole. You're not there anymore. Can you see how that narrative has got you now in a dream world? You can call it a dream world because it's not this one. It's not the one you're actually experiencing. Now, mind you, the narrative about things, the knowledge about things is important, relatively important for human life. This is the mechanism by which we communicate and we engage and we do things in life and the like. But you can also see if you are lost there, if you think that's all there is this conceptual knowledge is all there is, and that's actually what they teach in schools, and this is kind of the view of humanity, then the direct knowledge, a direct experience, the being present, is lost. And it seems as if you're immediately supposed to praise the flower and wonder what it is, and maybe even get out your app and take a picture and put it up there, and there's probably an app out there somewhere that'll tell you what kind of flower it is. And you can acquire all sorts of knowledge about. But the knowledge of, the direct experience of, is lost. Presence is experiencing things directly. So it's the way I teach meditation, or allowing. You're simply going to bring your attention away from the conceptual mind, away from emotional reactions, away from the sensations, not trying to stop them, not trying to do anything with them, but to simply sink into this place where you are aware of them without a story. Even a very active mind, right? If you're not saying, I shouldn't have an active mind, I should be meditating right now. If you don't say that, you're simply aware of the active mind, which that's what minds do. At which point you're present. Right? There's a lot of people who've gotten this mistaken notion that to be present is some kind of extraordinary spiritual state, and that when you do, it's going to be nothing but bliss. And it's not true. The biggest power you can have is to stay present when it's not blissful at all. In fact, when it sucks, when you're having a fight with your lover, or an argument with your family, whether your boss has just yelled at you about something, right? Or you're struggling because you're a little short on money, right? If they don't turn into stories, if you stay connected to the presence of the perfect moment and experience it without a story, and that means without judgment, without criticism, without an agenda to change it, without trying to do anything to it at all except be present with it, you are in the most powerful position. Because the moment you fall into the story, you are no longer responsive, you are reactive. You are now in your conditioning. And every reaction that happens when you fall into the narrative of the mind, every reaction from that point on is not conscious. It is the unconsciousness of conditioning, because conditioning is not conscious. It sucks your conscious attention. It doesn't actually suck consciousness in, because consciousness is always aware of the attention, but it sucks in the focus of your attention into the story. And at that point, the entire nervous system, the entire body is taken over by the conditioning, and everything from that point on is reactive. And that's, you can feel it when people are like that. You're having a conversation with something and they're distracted. Their mind is somewhere else, right? You can feel it. There's an energetic disconnect. There's a feeling of they're not there, right? And so there's no intimacy. There's no exchange. There's no real communication taking place. So let's see. So the way your question says, clearing the mind and getting into the present moment. Clearing the mind is not required. That will put you in an adversarial relationship with the mind. And because the mind is so closely identified with the body, it will literally begin to feel like it's physically threatened and will dig its heels in more and defend itself more. So to try to quiet the mind is the big mistake of a lot of people who learn and teach meditation. You can't and you don't want to. As Muji likes to say, trying to stop the mind is like trying to stop the wind dressed as a kite. You don't try to stop it. You withdraw your attention from it. The attention is the power that drives it. And at first that could be kind of difficult because we're so used to engaging with it. And then after a while you get some spiritual knowledge, I'm supposed to quiet the mind. And now you start fighting with the mind. Oh, I got to get a quiet mind. I got a quiet mind. Well, what is it saying? I got to get a quiet mind. I got to get a quiet mind. It's the mind, right? You are stuck in the loop. The only thing you can do is step out of it. Keep bringing yourself out of it. Notice, okay, there's the mind. I have no story about the mind. This is what minds do. I'm not in conflict with you. I'm not your enemy. Right? And of course, you step out of the conflict dissolves. The attention begins to move back towards yourself. As I was suggesting in the beginning, just bringing your attention back to your own existence, your own being. Right? There is the pure presence. And there, it doesn't matter whether the mind is talking or not. But paradoxically, when you get, the more you are established there, the less the mind talks, needlessly. And little by little, it goes from being your enemy that you have to clear in order to be present, to being a very powerful tool at your disposal, because now it is at the disposal of presence. It's not arguing with presence. So it really is simply removing your identification from the mind, from the story, even the spiritual ideas you have about yourself, into the direct experience of yourself, which is consciousness aware of everything. Does that help you, Arby? Ralphie says beer. Alcohol. It would appear on the surface that alcohol actually clears the mind, but it doesn't rise above the mind. It actually sinks below it. It just dulls the mind, so it's not as chattering. It dulls some of the negative emotions that normally capture our attention. Dulls the narrative, and that's a reason why a lot of people drink, so they get a little escape from their mind, especially very smart people who very easily get lost in their mind. But what I'm talking about is transcending the mind, going beyond it, becoming its master, not just dulling it. Please, cheers to all. And Coffin, how long do we have to download from IR before it take down the old site? I'm going to be giving it a couple of months, so don't worry about it. At least till around January 22nd. Yeah. I haven't been able to get stuff moved over fast enough, and the cycle date on the building is like the 22nd of December, so I won't get it done by then. So I would say January 22nd. Chris Skills, yeah, GP, good to see you, man. Have you heard the phrase, to remove a thorn, you use another thorn, then throw away one thorn, being knowledge? There comes a time when knowledge needs to be let go of. Yes, yes, I have. That's a metaphor that Ramana Maharshi used to use. You fall in a rose bush, you're stuck with thorns, they're stuck in you. So you pull out one thorn and you use that to dig out the others. Maybe a more modern example of that idea is there's times when the celery gets really old, and I'm putting it on the dish disposal. But before I put it down, I use it to shove everything else down the dish disposal, and then finally, when everything's down, I don't celebrate. Hey, look at this wonderful celery! Down it goes too, and the whole thing dissolves. Our desire for freedom is what he was talking about. The desire to truly be free is a desire, and it has as its roots the sense that we're not free. But the desire to be free helps us clear away all of the little things that distract us and keep us away. So keep us focused on the story rather than on presence. But once that has happened, you don't need any longer to hold on to even the desire for freedom, and you let that go too. As Buddha said, talking about his own teachings, you get in a boat, you go to the other side of the river or the lake. You don't then drag the boat behind you as you walk across the land. You leave it behind. You don't need it anymore. And he was doing that, referring even to his own spiritual teachings. All teachings and all teachers are eventually left behind. They're all temporary. They're all celery, pushing stuff down the disposal, and at some point there's no need for any of them. And so our desire to be free, to truly know ourselves, to know what's true, kind of takes over as the biggest of all the desires. It does that. It begins to clear up the lesser desires, the lesser transient desires, the desires for stuff that isn't really permanent. Right? Little by little, the desires we're left at are ones that are truly important to us. And as time goes on, they too begin to fade away into just this pure presence in which all desires already fulfilled. And then even the desire for freedom just begins to dissolve, because there's really no need to desire something you've always had. So what's being let go of, and this is an important thing, the thorn being the knowledge. Yes, knowledge, as I described it, the conceptual knowledge, knowledge about something, is always relative. It's not an absolute knowledge, and it's always changing. Trying to make relative knowledge absolute is where you get fundamentalism and tyranny and ideologies and all these things that are strangling humanity. But the letting go of the knowledge appears to be, when people say that, most of the time I have the feeling what they're talking about is there's some kind of process, right? There's some kind of process, and then they are going to let go of this desire. The letting go of a desire or of knowledge can only happen with the arrival of true understanding, which is true knowledge. And the deepest letting go is not so much the letting go of the knowledge, because the knowledge, our relative knowledge, is useful. We all have relative knowledge as how to get to places and how to drive a car and how to do various skills that we have, our knowledge at work and how to do a presentation or make a program or something like that. That's all very useful knowledge. We simply see it as relative knowledge and not existential knowledge. And then we dive into the deepest, which is the knowledge about ourselves. The one who thinks they're supposed to let go of knowledge, and that somehow, if I let go of knowledge, then I'm going to be there. That sense of self that is capable of holding on or letting go is the final thing that the desire for freedom digs out. It's the last thorn. It's not, letting go is not an action that the personal self takes. It is the personal sense of self that is let go of by pure consciousness or pure awareness. And this is an important thing to see, because the one, if it's me, a personal me, letting something go, I'm on the progressive path. I am learning, I am growing, I'm maturing. And if you may have noticed, those of you who have been doing such things, that you never run out of another thing to do. It's because it's just going to keep generating more things. That's the nature of the progressive path. And you never seem to quite arrive at the place where you've actually matured enough, learned enough, done enough. That's because you can't. Because no matter how mature, nuanced, subtle, and spiritually advanced the person becomes, it's still the person. It's not you. And you can make a very refined, gentle, compassionate person. And most religions, that's what they try to do. Not all of them. Certainly most Buddhist religions, that's what they try to do. Not Zen. It's a different thing altogether. Zen is the direct path, which I'm talking about, which is questioning the reality of the self that wants to let go and seeing that the entire thing is a picture in the mind. And you don't need cycles of time to mature fitness in order to wake up. That is the awakening. And what's awakening is awakening itself is waking up to the fact that it is not this person. When we're identified with a person, we try to make a better person. But when we see that we are not that person, we are freed from it. And then the natural power of life, which is naturally benevolent and loving and compassionate, just begins to shine through what used to be kind of opaque because of this belief in being a separate self. Does that kind of cover it and up-level it a bit for you, Chris? Hopefully you guys are still hearing me okay. I don't like having the laptop in my lap like this, but I want you to be able to hear me. Sarah. Hello, Sarah. Hey, G, so happy to be here. Just got back from Malaga, Spain a few hours ago, which was great, but this is better. Love, Sarah from France. Thank you, Sarah. Alessandra, hello from Monterey. Hello, Alessandra. So good to see you. Dave and Elaine. Hi, GP and all. Greetings. You're back from our India trip, and good to be here. Tiravam Malay, I can never say that word. And Rama Ashram was a special place for us and will always be in our hearts. Yes, his energy was definitely impressed onto that place. And sages of that magnitude have that impact. It's, it's like the music of a great composer that just kind of fills the space. I had the opportunity once when I was where was I? I can't remember where I saw it, but I couldn't touch it, of course, but I actually I was within a few feet of the harpsichord that was Mozart's. It was magic. You could just feel it. It was like in the room. It was like embodied in the wood. That energy had just so permeated it that it was just, it was really something to experience. I had similar feelings when I was standing in front of the Mona Lisa. Some other paintings, the lady in black from Picasso, and some other ones from Van Gogh, because in this particular place, I think it was in New York, in the Met. No, it wasn't in the Met. It was in the Guggenheim in New York, and they didn't have the velvet ropes and the glass around it, so you could actually stand right where the painter would have been when they painted it. again, just this most powerful energy. And so you go to a place like Ramana Ashram, and it's going to be permeated with that, with that energy. And if you just, I hope you took the opportunity to just kind of sit where people would have sit and listened to him and just kind of soaked up the energy that is still him. He even said to his attendants when he was very close to dying, they were all, he was just right on the verge of leaving, and they were all very sad. You could see it in their face. They're all very sad. He says, "What are you crying about? I'm not going anywhere. Stop looking to this body to find me." So he's still there, just not in form. He's still everywhere. Christ is still here. Buddha is still here. Nisargadatta is still here. Right? We're all still here. Nobody's gone anywhere. We're just so used to identifying with the body and form that we cannot identify the spirit that is animating the form. And that's what's real. That's the one. All this, this form is going to go. Hopefully later rather than sooner, but it is going to go. Right? Will I be gone? Absolutely not. Where am I going to go? Where else is there but here? So, Anja, hello from Germany. Hello, Anja. Errol Kala, hey G. I finally understand. Finally understand what I am now, thanks to you. What? Moving forward, do I just live this life with that understanding in the background, or do I try to integrate it into my daily life? If so, any tips? It's both. There's a growing sense of knowing that you are the consciousness that is aware of things, but on a more than conceptually. The planning has worked, and you are now looking directly into your actual being, the actual nature of your being, which is a wonderful and glorious place to be. Now, the first thing you do is you simply let that permeate the whole rest of your being. I'm going to say this now. I don't know if anyone will get it. I often talk about consciousness removing itself from thoughts, emotions, and sensations, right? We see those as patterns in the body, patterns in the nervous system. But when the awakening of consciousness begins to take place, the boundary of consciousness expands. And so thoughts are not something that just appear to consciousness that is problematic. The boundaries of consciousness expand to include it. And our ideas about what thought is, what the emotions are, what sensations are, what the body is, begins to change. We see that there's nothing but consciousness. And therefore, what I called a thought as an object of experience, when the subject-object relation falls away, I see that thought is nothing but consciousness. What you are experiencing right now is consciousness. There's not consciousness and something it is aware of. It is only aware of itself. So now we deepen this sense. We let consciousness begin to proliferate, to infect. You might say cure. It's the serum, really, that is affecting the cure and breaking down all of the barriers of the sense of being a separate person, which are embodied in thoughts, emotions, and sensations. And as they break down, thoughts, emotions, and sensations begin to lose their sense of being something objective and separate from you, and they themselves begin to take on the character of consciousness. They are consciousness. As that happens, the sense of the true sense of your being begins to go from insight into the direct, from the direct seeing into the direct feeling, and finally the direct living. And at that point, it's what they say in the Bible: the Word becomes flesh and dwells among us. And we beheld his glory, the firstborn of God. It's a beautiful statement when you realize that's what it's talking about. Not somebody in history that that was special, but we're talking about you, the experience of yourself as you actually are. So the tip then, the practice, if I can call it that, before I say the practice, the spirit behind the practice, the energy behind the practice, the desire, as it were, behind the practice, is no longer to acquire anything, freedom, understanding, acquire anything, but to express it. And in that energy of expressing, you become increasingly curious about the nature of reality. Because reality is not something you know at once and it's over, right? It's not like relative knowledge. It is perpetually unfolding. Who you are is so more vast and unbounded than you could possibly imagine, than the mind can possibly grasp. So every moment is a fresh explosion of the energy, the intelligent energy of being expressing itself in form. Every moment is a big bang, you might say, if you like to use that metaphor. So see your daily life as simply aspects of this realm, the realm of time, that are not yet fully conscious. And see yourself as the light, the pure, unbounded light of consciousness that is infusing that light into what used to be darkness. So now you become the light of the world, certainly the light of your world, bringing this into the direct into direct relationship and into direct engagement with your life as it is. So your life as it is becomes the ultimate practice. Being with your life as it is, no story, pure presence, is the ultimate practice. Now you may find yourself slipping back into old habits. That is, you'll find that old habit patterns still emerge. Now, if there's no identification with them, the emergence of them becomes a cause for rejoice, because there's more darkness being dispersed and more light emerging. Right? If there's an identification, there's a sense, oh no, where did this come? Oh, it's happening again. I must have lost my light. And it's a very subtle thing. And protecting, and I use that word, vigilantly protecting the integrity of the vision you have received is the mission. You don't let anything tell you that there's anything but that. And that truth will eventually eliminate every contradictory thought, feeling, and sensation to it. You'll completely dissolve every last bit of the separate self from every aspect of your life. And then you'll find that this life has never been separated from you, that it is simply you in form. But the you know yourself to be is the you in essence, which transcends all form and appears in all forms. And that's when the sense of being one with everything becomes a real actual experience and not just a nice idea. Does that answer it for you, Harold? That's a big question. It's a big question, and I'm loving that. I'm loving this. Congratulations to you. Congratulations. Yes, this is a wonderful event to emerge, and just treat it as the sacred moment that it is, as a grace. And remember, There's a beautiful phrase from Rumi, from Rumi, and he said, "The power that brought me here must bring me home." He's speaking to the sense of, in Christian terms, is grace. Consciousness awoke to itself. You, Errol, did not awaken to consciousness. Consciousness awoke from the dream of Errol. That is what you are experiencing. And when I say you, I'm talking about pure consciousness. When I say you to anybody here, I'm not talking to the person you think you are. I am talking to the consciousness that is animating the form, which has mistaken itself for the form, and thus limited itself to being a person. And that consciousness, which is nameless, formless, boundless, timeless, birthless, and deathless, is never for a moment confined to it. And so awakening is simply consciousness awakening to the reality of its being, and that it isn't now and never has been the person. Does that give you the guidance that you need, Errol? Thank you for that. Where are you from, Errol? Where do you live? Ergan Gross. Hi, GP. Greetings from Ocean Grove, Australia. Wow. Great to have you. Truth Loops. I like that. Hi, Truth Loops. Carrie Brogan. Hi, all. And GP. Hi, Carrie. Tonka. From Kitchener, Ontario. Kitchener. Hello to you. Sue McIntosh from South Africa. Hi, Sue. Good to have you. Tonka, could you talk about relationship between our body and consciousness? Why am I limited to perceive just through this body if we are one consciousness? Well, you're not. That is a belief. And that belief has restricted the range of our perception. So you can drop that idea that somehow you have been restricted. Now, that sense of restriction, it's very subtle. God, I hope I can find the words for this. The sense of being limited, perceived just through this body, is based on the idea that you as consciousness are localized in a form. And that there's a whole bunch of other consciousnesses out there that you don't have access to that are having a very different experience. Now, all experience is being had by consciousness. But the experience, to have an experience at all, the focus of attention has to contract from the infinite into a point of perception, a place of perspective. Imagine what it would be like. Rupert Spira used this example, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. You know, you're sitting here looking at me, looking at this, at me right now. Actually, take any object in the room that you're in, because everybody's looking at the same picture here. And take some kind of an object. Imagine this cup I have here with my tea. I'll take a sip. And it's sitting in the room, right? And there's 100 people in the room. Now, every person in that room is going to see this cup from a different angle, aren't they? Now, what would you be experiencing if you saw that cup from two angles at the same time, what would it look like? Now imagine looking at it from 100 points of view at the same time. Some even looking at it in really dim light, some looking with light pouring down on it, others looking at it from 100 miles away. It wouldn't be visible at all. You'd have no experience of it. The only way experience can happen is if consciousness focuses its attention in such a way that it takes a single point of view. That single point of view is what you call your life. Now, does that mean consciousness is limited to that point of view? Absolutely not. And simultaneously, there are literally billions of other points of view in this universe of consciousness. Every star point is a point of reference. You can see there's an infinite number of points of reference. And if you were looking simultaneously at an infinite number of points of reference, there'd be no experience. So you're looking at the necessity for consciousness to focus attention. Now, there's no problem with that. That's how we experience. I like having a focus of attention. I like being with someone individually and they get all of my attention. There's a wonderful intimacy and engagement that takes place there. So I'm seeing all sorts of aspects of them one at a time. So I really get to see the aspect. If I saw somebody's entire qualities simultaneously, I wouldn't see them at all, right? It's kind of like if I show you a seed and then I show you the flower and I show you the sprout and I show you the stem and then I show you the bloom or the bud and then I show you the bloom, it's all the same flower, isn't it? Now, what if I put them all together and you saw them all of this, the seed, the germinated seed, the sprout, the stem, the bud, the bloom, it'd be just a mess. So what you see instead is an unfoldment of what in fact is eternal and permanent and infinite. And that unfoldment is what we mistakenly call time. The fact of the matter is all of those simultaneously, but perception allows consciousness to experience it in the most beautiful detail, slow motion, so that we savor it. Every aspect of it can actually be seen. The infinite, all of it, is there in the background, but what's called out of that background of pure potential isn't all of it, is little at a time. That's what the word existence means. It comes from the Latin word existare, which means to stand apart. It's simply calling out of its infinite nature, which is invisible and unknowable, into the realm of being known. And this is what we call manifestation. This is form. This is existence. This is the dynamic aspect of consciousness, right? Now, the thought, I'm limited to that, right, is a misperception of that. That's a concept of this, is somehow I'm stuck in this perception. You're not. You never have been, you never will be. That's a belief. But what we are is experiencing a particular timeline. And all timelines exist simultaneously. They're all known to you. But when you think of yourself as being a finite person, limited, and that consciousness is something else that's unlimited, you have a conceptual version of this. And now you see consciousness as this infinite thing, which becomes completely unknowable and amorphous. And what's happening here is some kind of mistake, some kind of a problem. No, it's not. This is how consciousness knows itself. Because everything you're seeing, the seed and the flower, are aspects of the infinite nature of consciousness, of pure infinite consciousness. But this is how it's known. Take that away and you have the pure absolute awareness. But the pure absolute awareness knows itself, and this is how it does it. Is that clear? I know it's subtle, and I know it can be rather out there, but this is actually how it works. So it's not a mistake, right? So don't worry about trying to make yourself the one consciousness. Instead of focusing your attention on this infinite consciousness and thinking that what you're experiencing now isn't infinite consciousness, recognize that what you are is infinite consciousness being able to experience itself as you, which liberates you from limitation, liberates consciousness from thinking it's something other than itself, and makes this moment the fullness of all life. This is to behold eternity, hold eternity in the palm of my hand and see infinity in a flower. That's what William Blake meant by that. That's the experience. So this moment is the infinite experience. It's not a problem we have to get out of in order to experience the infinite. You are the infinite, but this is how the infinite experiences itself. It can't be any other way. Because as the purely infinite, there is no experience. Nothing exists. It is just pure potential. Nothing arises. Nothing is. Nothing exists. That is, nothing gets set apart from the background. But the background and the setting apart are all the infinite consciousness. But this is how it works. This is how God knows herself. Does that help, Tonka? Anybody else who have not heard that before? Maybe that'll open some eyes to other people. That's why in Zen, the highest achievement is always coming back to the ordinary human being. But now it's not the ordinary human being anymore. It's not just this being struggling to be something. This is it. This is the divine. This is the infinite. This is the eternal. I don't know how else I can say it. All right, I'll let it go for now. Benjamin Ochoa. Beautiful. On board with this. Cool. Anton, how can we stop procrastinating and distracting from doing meditation and self-inquiry? Become more interested in it. The problem is, Anton, is that what happens is it happens in a lot of spiritual practice. It's the progressive path. It's most spiritual engagement that I run across, and I did it too until I discovered genuine non-duality in Zen. We're doing meditating and self-inquiry as a practice to get somewhere. It becomes a practice that the person is doing in order to become more mature and more spiritual and have better experiences. Right? As such, you're going to run right into all of the other interests of the person, a lot of which have nothing to do with that. Right? I'd much rather be watching something on Netflix or go on a date or have a beer or something, right? So the key is this is not a practice. And if you have to make yourself meditate or inquire, something's off. You can't maintain discipline like that, right? So what I always attempt to do in satsang is to inspire you to become simply curious, so curious about this that it naturally engages you, right? I mean, I can't force you to watch a TV show that you find to be boring and uninteresting, right? You're just not going to do it. Now, why would you? Why would anybody, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But what you are interested in, my goodness, can anybody keep you away from it? You're antsy if you have to do something else. You want to get to it. It's like falling in love. I don't have to get you to make an appointment, right? To think about your beloved. You can't help it because you're totally in love with it. So, the real point of satsang and these pointings is to get you to fall in love with this. So these ideas become so vital to you that when you sit down, meditate, or inquire, it isn't a discipline you have to do to get somewhere. It's the place you're trying to get. And then with that spirit of behind it, even the distractions and the procrastinations can become opportunities for meditation. Rather, I got to get rid of this procrastination. You become curious about it. Go, wow, where's this coming from? Why is it I feel this resistance to doing what I actually love doing? And when I actually sit down to do it, I really like it. So what's the resistance? Now you're inquiring, right? That's genuine inquiry, not, oh, what am I? It's not that. It's like, well, this is happening right now. Right now, there's a feeling of procrastination, which means I'd rather do something other than this. Now, what's that about? Where's that coming from? From where is that emerging? Oh, I can find that there's a part of me that really doesn't want to do that. Well, why? What is it that it's resisting? Is this just the ego resisting its own discovery? Is it just many years of just indulging in trivial desires, and now I've got this habit going that makes me want to go this way rather than that way? It's the entire process becomes an inquiry. Then the resistance and the procrastination themselves become the meditation. You turn the light of your awareness on them rather than thinking they're problems that you have to get away from. In Zen, they like to say the obstacle is not in the path. The obstacle is the path. Whatever is coming up in your experience is the focus of your attention, because that's what's here. That's what it means by being in the now. That's what the whole book, Power of Now, is about, right? It's here. We're saying procrastination shouldn't be here, but it's here. So we deal with what is here, not what we think should be here, what should be happening. It should be different. I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's all ridiculous. You are. And obviously, awareness doesn't have a problem with it, because if awareness restricted it, you'd not know it was there at all. So awareness has already let it in. So the only resistance to it at that point has to be the small, limited sense of self that wants it to be something else, which is the other way of saying the ego. The ego is always arguing how things are different than they are, and then give you all the reasons. And if you get sucked into that reason, they say, oh, I should be more disciplined. I've got to make myself do this, right? And so now the ego loves that. Conflict, boom, conflict. Love it. There's no love in that, is there? There's no passion in it. There's no fun. Who wants to do that, right? So instead go, okay, look what's happening. I got this feeling going on in my body. I wonder how many other things it has kept me from that I really am interested in. Right? All of a sudden, the problem, quote unquote, becomes the doorway or the portal to your practice. It is your practice, right? Not something in the way of it. It is your practice. Does that help? It's such a powerful thing to understand. This is what's in consciousness in the moment. That's your practice. As simple as that. Whatever's in your consciousness right now is your practice. Right? So when you sit down to do it, you do it. And you know, if you set up a regular meditation practice for yourself, and at certain points in people's lives, I recommend that they do that. Let's say you get up every morning at 5 and you meditate, or do every day at 2 in the afternoon, whatever it is, do it. Set the alarm and do it. Set your ass down on the cushion or wherever it is you do it, and then be with that resistance to it. Be with all the feelings. Even if you go for a half an hour and your mind is spinning and your emotions are all over the place, doesn't matter, right? Just be present with even the resistance and all of it to it. And the discipline is simply only allowing yourself to be present with what's unpleasant, right? And becoming increasingly curious about that. And that will open up some doors for you, I'm sure. It's an interesting thing. Little by little, you just fall in love with it so much that you can't help but do it. I still do it. It's just still spontaneously happens all of a sudden in the middle of anything. I'll just begin like the breath will go out and just be being. And then there's engagement again, right? I don't do that during satsang, or I'd be gone and you'd have no satsang. So I stay engaged here. And then when this is over, anyway, how's that, everybody? Powerful position, says Benjamin. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ben, but thank you. Oh, the ministration of subject, the mistranslation of subject and object is crazy indeed. Yes, very good. LOL. Good. Robert, does the eating from the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden represent the fall of grace from knowing your true self to now having an ego and seeing the world through a character? That is exactly what it's pointing at. The veiling of the transcendent by the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The knowledge of the tree of good and evil is there. That's the knowledge of the subject-object split, right? When it is eaten of, right, our entire perspective changes. In the case of the Garden of Eden, the first thing they felt, shame and fear, right? Which is, of course, exactly what we feel when that initial trauma takes place and that sense of separation strikes us. It happens when we're very young, usually between about 2 and 3 years old, sometimes younger. Immediately there's the sense of separation brings a sense of fear, and then the sense of shame and the fear of lack, fear of dying and the fear of lack, and that sense of shame. It's my fault. It was all my doing. And of course, in the story of Garden of Eden, that's exactly how it got interpreted by eventually by the Roman Catholic Church. The disobedience was the ultimate sin. Now, if you're after nothing but absolute power over people's lives, the number one sin would be disobedience. To really look at it intelligently, the real disobedience was the real sin was falling into ignorance. It was that ignorance that cast them out of the garden being the garden of undifferentiated consciousness. And then the gate to the gateway back in was guarded by the cherubs with the flaming double-edged swords, guarding the tree of life. So to get back to the tree of life, we have to get through the swords, and the two-edged swords is the elimination of the subject object, and that's exactly what is symbolized on the Christ on the cross. The cross was the tree of life on which he crucified himself and thus cut through and eliminated past and future, heaven and earth, and that's the reconciliation that it's pointing at. Every time you identify yourself with the separate self, you've taken another big bite of the apple. That's what it represents. That's the real meaning of it. It never happened, folks. There is no Garden of Eden anywhere. There never was an Adam and Eve. That's not what the story was ever intended to be. The taking of mythological truth, of the transcendent appearing through an inflection of a particular culture to reveal a transcendent truth. When that is misinterpreted as history, you get tyranny, you get ideology, you get fundamentalism, you get the absolute insanity that our modern world is. You get, this Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and Joel Osteen and these Graham, Lindsey Graham, Billy Graham's son, whoever it is. It is now all these preachers praying for Trump, and that's the kind of insanity you get when a mythological truth is interpreted as historical fact. It becomes cold, it becomes petrified, right? And becomes increasingly virulent, increasingly violent, increasingly restrictive, increasingly nasty. It's the inevitable end result. It really is referring to what we talk about here on Satsang all day, every day, every time we do it. And that is that the split was imaginary. The eating blinded them to the reality of oneness. And the recovery of oneness is then represented by Christ, who said it was the fulfilling of the law. But it wasn't a personal sacrifice that did it. It was the revelation. He was that revelation of truth, the antidote, crucified on the tree of life, which rent the veil of the temple and opened the door, never to be closed again. So yes, indeed, that is exactly what it means, Rob. I hope that my additional elaboration on that was helpful. Mary Sykes. Hi, GP. I did not get a notice that you would be live like I usually do. Oh, sorry. I have to check the technology. Technology is always the little rock on my path, a little rock on my shoe. It's just when you think everything's working, something doesn't. It's like, okay, so I have to be completely present. This is what technology is. Okay. Sorry about that, but glad you made it. David Maloney, gee, I found inquiry so helpful. I examine if what I tell myself is true. However, perhaps even this I use as a method to feel better. In other words, it assumes the feeling is bad. I guess I'm trying to find the balance between inquiry and simply being with the emotion in silence. I feel like both may be essential. Oops, just lost it. Sometimes the screen just jumps, and sometimes it jumps apart. Trying to find the balance between inquiry, being emotion side. I feel like both may be essential, but I should maybe, in choosing which process to lean on. Love these sessions. Thanks. Look, it's okay to feel better. It's okay to want to feel better. We're not on this path to feel worse. This is the path for alleviating suffering. So, of course, our suffering tells us there's a better state to be arrived at, and that there's a way to get. That was the Buddha's first teaching. There is suffering. There's a cause of suffering. There's a cure for suffering, end to suffering, and there's a means to that end. So they say, "Oh, I shouldn't want to feel better." Of course, you want to feel better, right? That's our nature. And to think I shouldn't want to feel better because wanting to feel better or wanting to feel worse, they're both the same thing. They're both seen by consciousness. That's neo-Advaita nonsense, right? Obviously, it's qualitative. I'd rather be hugging somebody than have a sharp stick in the eye. Hello, right? Of course, that's it. That's why we're doing this. We're rooting out the root cause of suffering, so we have the feeling of consistent contentment, right? And we're doing that by discerning what is true and what isn't. Now, sometimes there's inquiry, and allowing, and even some integration. Sometimes you be very, very pressed. Is this thought really true? Is this view of myself really true? And it's okay if the desire is to get to the root of it so you feel better, because there's something suffering, right? You want to alleviate that. Other times, right? Sometimes the mind gets cloudy, or you can't do it, or it's not effective. Well, then you just surrender to it. Then you just withdraw. You just be with the feeling, and you notice that there's a desire to feel better. Okay, fine. Of course there is. Not a conflict with being present with what's distressing you. When the desire to feel better takes over and makes you pull away from that, distracts you, does something to get out of that, that's different, right? But as long as you're there in that position of allowing, of presence, you're seeing that, of course, I don't want to suffer, right? Duh, right? But I'm not going to follow the patterns that I had in the past, which simply repressed the suffering and distracted me momentarily. The suffering was still there. So the desire for freedom, which is all that is, the desire to feel better is the desire for freedom, is there. It is the one freedom that roots out one desire that roots out all the others. That gives you permission to just simply be with the feeling of distress. And with the feeling of distress, the feeling of not feeling better, that with that feeling, the inquiry, in a sense, actually continues, because you're dropping your story about it. It's not this kind of inquiry with, to whom is this distress appearing? Who is it that's feeling that? That's a more Advaita or Vedanta inquiry. This is more of a sense of, there's this feeling here, and I'm just going into the feeling without any story. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it came from. I'm putting aside all of my psychological knowledge, all of my spiritual ideas, and I'm just being with this feeling that I want to alleviate. I don't want to suffer. And so I'm not turning away from the suffering, I'm turned towards it. But my goal is to go through it to the peace that is the ultimate goal. That's what we're after: happiness, peace, which means contentment, which means that when things come up, they don't create suffering anymore. They come up, you do with what you need to them, and they go away. Life is going to continue to do that. Doesn't matter what level you get to, right? There will be challenges on that level, period. It's the way it is. It's always going to be that way. It's never going to change, right? So it's not a big deal. What we're freeing ourselves from is our stories about the experience. So at that point, the true allowing is moving towards it, looking at it with no story about it whatsoever. Now, the I want to feel better can turn into a resistance towards it. And you just notice that. There's a resistance towards that. And of course, for many, many years, decades really, I've always tried to get away from this feeling. So there's some habit energy, right? Maybe some really creative ways in which I've made that happen, right? I've managed to keep it under the rug. But I'm not doing that anymore. I'm listening to it. And then you move closer to it. And sometimes it's very difficult, right? There's a lot of resistance. At times like that, I will use something like tapping to help settle the nervous system so that you can remain present with it, right? Again, we're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to understand it. As long as the motivation is to liberate it and ourselves, you're solid. You're okay. It's not a problem. When the motivation is to get rid of it, you're in conflict, right? And it's subtle. You get used to seeing that. So I think that explains the two ways. The purely Vedantic side, which can happen as well, is this feeling would be there, and the focus would go, instead of going towards the feeling, that would be the tantric approach, right? Instead, it goes towards the one who's having the feeling, to whom it's appearing, and you start now looking for, who is it that's actually having this experience? Who is it that's saying, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want this to go away? Who's saying that this is terrible, that this is a bad thing? And now it becomes the introspective view that starts to expose that the one who creates suffering is the sense of a separate self. And that separate self is not in the actual experience you're having. That begins to dissolve, and with that, this experience ceases to be suffering because there's no sufferer anymore. Is that clear delineation of those two different paths for you guys? David, you're doing great. Fantastic. Is presence possible without questioning thoughts? Conscious presence? No, it's not. You are always present, right? But because consciousness is the presence, and yes, you're present, but you cannot be consciously present unless you are aware of and not identified with the flow of thinking, the flow of thoughts. If you are, and you are in the flow of thoughts, you consciousness are identified with those thoughts. And those thoughts are not just thoughts you're having, they are you. They will then define your experience, they will limit you, and they will create suffering. And the experience is you won't be present in your own life. There'll always be a buffer between you and experience. And that buffer is identification with thought. As I was saying, in the example I used of when you go to the park and there's suddenly you're captivated by this flower you hadn't seen before, and it's stunningly beautiful, and there's a moment of absolute presence. It's the pure joy. You and the flower are one. You're not even there. And then thought starts. Now, if you catch it and just stay with the actual experience of it, just feeling the beingness of it, with no need to know what it is or where it came from or how you can get one or wanting to pick it or anything like that, right? That's presence. But the moment you start into the narrative about it and wanting to know about it, you're not impressed. There's a buffer now between you and life. And that's the suffering of being identified with thought. It creates a buffer between you and experience. You're not actually experiencing anymore. It's like I go so many places and I see these incredibly beautiful things and I'm just in awe. And I look around and I see other people with their taking pictures and videos and like this. They're not there. They're not seeing that. There's this incredibly huge vista in front of them, stunning, and they're looking at it this little screen, right? There's a buffer. There's no experience there. They're not present. They're not living their life. They're living in a dream world. Watch people walking down the street. I go to the. I used to live in Miami, right on the beach. It was really lovely. I go down from my apartment, and on the weekends I couldn't go. If you go down, you go to the beach on the weekend. Now here's the Atlantic Ocean. Sometimes the water is so clear you can see to the bottom, right? Sometimes you could actually walk out, 100 yards, and there'd be like a little reef you could stand on, right? I mean, just this stunning vista in front of you, right? And sometimes, God, the sunrises and the sunsets and things like and I'd be there. And I couldn't go there on the weekends because about every 20 feet is somebody with a boombox, right? Blaring the music, right? And it's talking, they're on their phones. It's like they're not here. They're not there. That's what it means. And that's why I say you can't be present when you're lost in thought. See, go hike in the woods and notice somebody walking down who happens to be with their phone or they've got their headphones in or something. Right? It happens in nature. It happens all the time in the city. You can understand it in the city or in the gym. I wear headphones with ocean sounds playing just to drown out the dribble music that they normally play in those places. So there's sometimes when you don't want to be present with what's there, and it's a nice way to not be present. But even that's a conscious choice, right? And there have been the times when my phone ran out of battery or something like that, and I was at the gym and I couldn't. Right? At that point, I surrendered to the moment, and there's no suffering. So presence is when you're having the direct experience, and the non-dual is always pointing you to the direct experience. That when you experience life as it actually is, you are having the non-dual experience. Like when you see that flower, and there's that moment of wow, and the duality between you and the flower disappears. You're back in the Garden of Eden. It is undifferentiated consciousness. It is pure experience. There's no narrative starting yet, and therefore there's no ego there then. And so you and that flower are one. Consciousness in awe of its own beauty being reflected back to it. Then the mind starts and out you come. And this is the difference between knowing and knowing about. An intimate knowing and knowing about and conceptual knowledge. So learning how to discern what is conceptual knowledge and thought and experience life without that, at least for periods of time. I mean, sometimes the demands of life require your 100% focus of attention on this right there. But even then, if your attention is totally focused on what you're doing and you're not distracted, because what you're doing, it's not be just sitting in presence and enjoying life. It may be some job you have to do that requires concentration. That's still presence. Right? Because you're absolutely focused with what needs to be right this moment. You're not arguing with it. When I used to do computer systems, they were enormously complex systems. And in order to come up with a solution, I had to sit for long periods of time in the midst of this not knowing. It was utter complexity. And it just went, and an idea would come and I'd start to move in that direction. And suddenly it would begin to unfold and I'd see it wasn't going to go anywhere. So I'd have to back off again. And then eventually it would start to open. I said, yes, this is the one that's going to be it. But those times, enormous focus of attention. People used to actually come by and have to shake me in order to get my attention because they'd speak to me and I wouldn't hear. Okay? It's focus. Talk to athletes. They talk about being in the, in the zone, people being in the flow. That's presence, right? There's no thinking going on. It's the pure engagement with life, and it becomes a way of life. It's not just a practice you do. It starts as a practice because we don't normally do it. Right now, for the most part, people see something immediately, and the narrative starts, and they don't even know that there's an experience of what they're looking at or hearing, separate from the narrative about it. So, hear people listen to a piece of music and they'll immediately start talking about it or something, right? And they won't hear it anymore, right? So I'm probably beating a dead horse here. What I'm trying to say is that yes, it is a habit that disconnects us from life, and conscious presence is not possible while we are identified with thought and always immediately susceptible to being seduced into the narrative of the moment from the moment. And that's just something we have to become conscious of. When you become conscious of it, the gaps in time, that what seems instantaneous, right? The event happens, my interpretation of it happens. That gap begins to open up and you see that they are not at all the same. That this is a reaction to this. This really happened. This isn't happening, right? This is the reality being experienced in the moment. This is an arbitrary conditioned set of thoughts that aren't even true, that were put in place a long time ago based on an interpretation that was downloaded to you by your culture. It's not even true, right? And then you could begin to see through the whole fabrication of the human mind. And at that point, two things open up to you. One is the space to actually enjoy without a narrative, putting down your phone and actually being with the vista with no need to take a picture of it, right? The other thing that happens is the power to inquire into and to see the truth or falsity of what that conditioned pattern was. Because when it immediately grasps you, it becomes the truth. When that distance opens up, you can look and go, oh, God, that's insane. That's not true. And now the discriminating power of consciousness. Because remember, consciousness is the truth. It can discern between truth and falsity if it can step back and look at it. Okay? So now you can look at that and go, well, that's utter nonsense. That's bullshit. That's just been a repetitive pattern. So that power of presence isn't just the deep enjoyment of the moment. It's also the power of genuine intelligence. I wanted to make that one last point before I let that one go, because it's obviously it's important, because non-dual inquiry doesn't leave everything equal and flat. There's a big difference between Mozart and Justin Bieber. I'm sorry, they are not equivalent. There are differences in quality of experience, and that which distinguishes the difference only comes from presence, which is the infinite intelligence that can tell the difference between truth and falsity. That's the consciousness that gets cultivated and culminates in we fall into the duality, believing the duality. That's the fall from grace in the Garden of Eden. The full consciousness that now can see that consciously and distinguish what isn't true and what isn't. That is the two-edged sword, and that's what Christ represents on the cross. That consciousness which clearly delineates past, future, heaven, earth, right, wrong, up, down, all of the opposites now just don't fold back into an undifferentiated childlike consciousness. You become the sage, the one who knows both the undifferentiated and the clear discrimination. So now we're talking about infinite wisdom and infinite compassion. We're talking about infinite intelligence and infinite enjoyment. We're talking about Vedanta and Tantra. I think I'll leave it at that. I need a drink of water. What's the time at this point? 2:37. Oh, got my 20 minutes. Oh, we got somebody new. Lane Justice. Welcome, Lane. Glad to have you. Where are you from? Hi, new to channel. I'm only about halfway through the questions today. My answers are long. I hope it's okay for everyone. Bear in mind, please always bear in mind that whether I answer your question specifically or not, your question was answered. It has to be. Any question that honestly comes up in your heart and is given to consciousness to answer, not your mind, because your mind will go on and on and on. It's got all sorts of stories about it. But if it's given to your heart, the soul of consciousness for an answer, it will be in some form. It may not have words or images, it may not come out of my mouth, but it will come. I guarantee you it will come. Arby, oh no, that's one I just did. Nazran, hi G, started to feel other people's energies. Is it real? Or do I imagine it? No, it's absolutely real. Of course you do. We are one. There's only one consciousness. And so you will feel the energy of others. How do you think I answer the questions? I'm not just looking at the words, I'm feeling. Why this particular answer than that particular answer? Well, the answer, two people can ask the same question and have a very different context, a very different need sitting underneath, and a very different level of understanding and a different level of capacity to understand and answer. So I can't just go by the question. I have to feel the energy, right? So I kind of feel into it, and a thought will come, and I go, yeah, that's the direction to go in this case. Other times, no, let's scale it back. We can't go there. It's always about feeling the energy, right? Again, an example. One of the examples I used earlier is like, you're going on a first date, right? The first date, you don't know the person, right? You're talking about things, you're asking questions, superficial knowledge, right? Because that's the conversation. What's really going on? There's an energetic thing going on. To say, is there some compatibility? Is there some chemistry here? Is there some stuff? Is there some feeling of being engaged? Are they present? Right? All of this stuff is actually happening on the surface. This is 90% of it. It appears as 10% of. So feeling the energy of others is really what we do. Now, not oddly enough, this is the nature of the egoic mind. The egoic mind doesn't want that to happen because the egoic mind lives in thought. It's always the thought about it. It always wants to reinforce the ideas about it rather than your gut level feel. It doesn't want you to trust the heart. It doesn't want you to trust the gut, because that's telling the truth. That's telling you what's really happening. That's telling you who's really here. So, and I always point out when I teach people how to coach, which I do periodically, not that often, but I do it periodically. The moment you are in the relationship with somebody as a coach or as a healer, no matter what that might be, therapist, massage therapist, chiropractor, EFT expert, hypnotherapist, the moment you're in that relationship, that line, the boundary between you dissolves, and your feelings and their feelings intertwine. So if I'm working with somebody, I'm not reading their minds. I'm only feeling my own energy, and I know that my own energy is vibrating in sympathy with theirs. So I can say something like, "You're feeling some constriction in your throat, right?" And they say, "Right. How did you know?" So, well, I'm feeling constriction in your throat. 99 times out of 100, it's what they're feeling. Sometimes it isn't. So I always have to check and don't assume anything. Be always humble when you're in a situation like that. But without that, energy healing, spiritual healing is not possible. It is a coming together of two, and that coming together with the intention to heal. Right? Two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. It means that the divine intelligence, divine love is now present. It's running the show, and you're the conduit through which it's happening. And so you will feel the energy of others. And sometimes you'll feel that, don't trust this guy. Well, don't trust them then, right? If they prove trustworthy later, don't give them, if that feeling is there, you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. If it isn't there, give them the benefit of the doubt, right? But if it isn't there, if that feeling is there, that feeling is there, stand back. I'm not sure I should be doing this. And that can be hard sometimes. And that can be especially hard with people that you already know, people you have a relationship. There's a dynamic going on there. And suddenly you're becoming more sensitive. So you're feeling some other energy there that this isn't feeling right, right? Because the ego level of relationships you had before is dissolving, and a much more powerful, much more intelligent thing is being there. I mentioned before to the question from Arby that about being present, and that with the opening up of that presence comes the power of discernment. Right? You can now feel, whoa, I used to be okay with that. That energy is not okay anymore. That's a clearer vision. That's wisdom coming into the world, right? This is not a transcendent that takes you out of the world. This is a transcendence that comes into the world, right? That's the big difference between the Zen Buddhist approach, the approach of the Bodhisattva, and the approach of the Arahat, the one who seeks to get into nirvana and out of the world. The Bodhisattva goes from nirvana into the world consciously. And so that why is the one that Buddha regarded as the highest. It's safe, just one step away from being a Buddha itself, themselves. So it's quite real. Now, when you start feeling the energy of others, this is really important. Do not immediately start jumping to conclusions as to what it means, because now it'll be a new level of experience, right? Consciously aware of you've always been aware of the energy. I'm sure we've all had feelings of people that just kind of weren't drawn, or sometimes you're just not drawn to them. There's just nothing there, and you feel it. The more conscious that becomes, the more you're aware, really consciously aware of it. Because it's a new level of perception that has begun to open up, the mind will want to interpret it from past experiences. And at first, you may not know how to interpret it. So you don't be quick to jump on. Be with it, is what I'm trying to say. Be with that energy. It will unfold to you through wisdom. The reality of what this energy is will become clear. And if you're not sure, there's no rush. Just kind of back off to a safe distance. Be present with it, and let it unfold itself to you. That's how you become really wise, and that is what makes the best healers. The ones who can do that. The ones who just simply remain present even when they don't know. And if you're working with somebody you've never met before as a healer, you don't know, right? If you've got a particular modality as a healer, the temptation is going to be really high to interpret that experience of them through the lens of your particular modality. I tell you, don't do that. Carl Jung said, don't do that. You cannot assume anything when you're in a relationship, especially in a healing relationship, with someone. You can make no assumptions whatsoever. You don't want anything to cloud your direct seeing. Even if what you eventually see confirms what your modality would have said about it, you can see that that's coming from a different place. So whenever you start working with somebody or being with somebody, put aside the past, because it's probably not relevant. You don't want to see through the eyes of thought. You want to experience directly, which is experience it through the heart. Storm Dancer is here. Hello from Australia. Hello, Storm Dancer. A cup. LOL, says Storm Dancer. I'm not sure. It's funny. I see all these messages that get compounded, and I lose the thread. I don't know which one's referring to what. Evaldo from Brazil. Hi. Good to have you. I love Brazil. I love Brazil. I've been to Rio a couple of times. Stayed in Niterói. Lane, I feel like you're overthinking this, bud. Are you talking to me? In terms of, and what are you referring to in terms of the overthinking? Sorry, I've lost the thread. Let me look back and see if I can find it. Yep. I'm well, thank you. And you? I don't know who's talking to you. Nice to know you. Nice to know you, Evaldo. Thank you. I'm not really understanding all this. Okay. Okay. And Lane says, I personally think you're full of shit. You are more than entitled to that, Lane. Although it would probably be more useful if you, rather than just being totally dismissive, and there's lots of places you can go if you're totally dismissive, but to actually take issue with exactly what I'm saying and where the disagreement lies. That'd be more useful for all of us, really. Paul Joseph, our pure potential is to let go of potential. Is mankind the collective conscious mind of God, which is the detox? Our pure potential is to let go of potential. Is mankind the collective conscious mind of God? Well, on one level, you could say yes to that. Is mankind, our pure potential is to let go of potential. I'm not sure that's really true. Experiment detached awareness. That does not see the details. No, it's actually both. I mean, without pure potential, without music, you don't have a song. Without a song, music is unknown. So the realm of the ultimately real is the realm of pure potential. Anything can come to be. What is the mechanism through which it comes into existence? Temporarily, of course. But everything that comes into existence gives expression to the nature of the source of that it came in. Every song reveals a little bit more about music, right? Every song shows you the infinite potential of music. There's no limit to it. There are no restrictions on it. It's absolutely limitless. And it is not confined to any particular song. So the infinite magnitude of the potential of music is made manifest in individual songs and in the sheer infinite quantity of individual songs. So the potential for something and the thing are actually one. So you're not really letting go of potential in that sense. If by that you're talking about letting go of all the things you want to do and be and have in your life, that has a little bit more meat. That's a little bit more accurate. Letting go of all of that, well, I want to be really clear about this because I don't want to make this sound too restrictive. There's a natural desire in all of us that arises to realize our full potential. And every individual being has full potential. It has enormous potential. Every individual form, which is the individual you, the new you know, your individual life, itself has unlimited potential in so many different ways. The fullness, so think of your life as a song, right? Is a great piece of music with a theme that can be repeated over and over again and developed. And there's just, I mean, it's just like this amazing song that can play for years and never get uninteresting. But that's not the only one. There's mine and yours and everybody else's, right? Is one of those instances of the full possibility of potential. So it's natural for us in our human lives to love, want to fulfill that potential. As a matter of fact, we feel very unhappy when we don't. And it's one of the essential conflicts that creates a trauma very early on in life, where us wanting to fulfill our pure potential runs into the limitations and values and restrictions of our culture and our tribe, which doesn't want to do that, which wants to conform you and put you in a box and keep you there. So in either case, we're not letting go of potential. Potential is the nature of life. And the experience of life is the experience of a way of realizing more and more what you're capable of, what can come through you, what's available to you. Now, your other question is mankind the collective conscious mind of God, or you said, or pure awareness. I want to say yes, but I don't want you to just take that intellectually and think of it like that. It's a portal. It's a way of seeing that the world around you is not objective. It's not material. It's not a bunch of objects out there in space-time. That the experience you're having is consciousness knowing itself, and not consciousness confined to a head. You know, in here somewhere in the frontal lobe, there's this little thing there that's actually conscious. That's actually me. Right? Definitely very small. And then there's this rest of the world out there. That's an interpretation, a projection, projected on experience. The entire thing is happening within consciousness. So you could say, referring to the ultimate pure, undifferentiated consciousness, that experience is the mind of God, God knowing herself. You could say it like that. If that's a doorway for you that opens up a portal that leads more deeply into understanding, then it's a great metaphor. For others, it's not. For others, it doesn't really work very well. So I think I'll kind of leave it at that. No, whatever. Storm Dancer. Sorry, I meant detached awareness. That does not see the details. Right. I hope I answered it, Paul. It's both seeing them and not seeing them at the same time, which I know sounds paradoxically, but that's the deal. Jags, hey G, what's your view on antidepressants? Pick up a Bible. Oh, here we go. All right. Oh, of course. You have an axe to grind. Yeah. I got it. Hold on, give me a second. Remove. Well, an antidepressant, for some people, they need it, right? They can't function. The depression has gotten so severe that they can't function. In which case, you simply offer up. You offer up what is needed to alleviate as much suffering as you can, but recognize that it's not a cure. I know people are on antidepressants, and on one hand, they like having the lows, but they miss having the highs, because the antidepressant basically squeezes emotional experience into a very narrow channel. And so you not only are freed from a lot of the suffering in your life, you're also kicked out of the joy of it. And that to me is the big tragedy. That to me is where it is what is That's why it's only a temporary solution. Right? Now, if it's needed, it's needed. Like any kind of drug or medication, if it's needed, it's needed. I do believe that that somebody, if they really want to take responsibility for their health, needs to deeply examine the all aspects of it, nutrition, the toxicity of their environment, um, uh, more holistic medicines, acupuncture, EFT, hypnotherapy. There's all sorts of ways that don't have the same kind of profound impact on your body and just don't restrict you. So there's other modalities that are far more, I think, are far more better for you. And then ultimately, the thing that really will clears the decks is the is to examine, be able to examine those feelings that come up of depression um, directly without trying to push them away or suppress them. And that can be hard, very hard to do. I mean, depression is the way in which is the result. It's the nervous system as it has detached itself from extremely painful traumatic events. Suffering that was so severe that it just kept popping up, and it's just cut itself off from feeling. The energy just completely and totally contracts. And so it takes an enormous amount of courage to go back towards the things that were so painful that we just kind of had to shut down. But the pain of being in depression, the sense of powerlessness and vulnerability and inability to do anything about it, after a while it becomes so deeply ingrained that we think of ourselves as depressive people, and therefore it's now an identification as well. So on one hand, I see them as an antidepressant as the most temporary of aids, and that one needs to really dutifully take responsibility and explore all other different ways of approaching it that will actually, because with an antidepressant, that's all you're ever going to get. It's not a cure. It's never meant to be a cure. They don't want it to be a cure. They make too much money off of it. It is always meant to keep you in that state. So knowing that it's not a cure and never going to be a cure should clue you in that it's a temporary means. Again, I would never tell somebody not to do it. When you need it, you need it. But you need to go somewhere and to some people other than somebody who's just trying to give you a drug to see if there's some alternatives that'll help you. So I hope that helps, Jags. Jay and David, only foolishness to a person who thinks they have it all figured out. Amen to that. That's why Aristotle was a Plato. I know nothing. I'm the wisest man because I know nothing. Right? You can't figure it all out. It can't be done. Eduardo, I believe at God, Jesus, Buddha, etc., but I found God inside me. Yes. Jack, I don't know your problem, but my advice is you don't take antidepressants. There are other ways to get the bliss. I only disagree with you, Evolved, because in a public forum like this, we should not be telling anybody what they should and shouldn't do in terms of something that may be prescribed by a doctor. That's irresponsible, and frankly, it's actually illegal. So, because it's a public forum, and I wouldn't even really say that directly, you should just stop taking them. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know the depths of the depression. I don't know anything surrounding it, but I totally agree. Explore other things. I don't know if Jags is asking this for himself or he's asking for someone else. This is important to note, though, Jags, that nothing whatsoever can interfere with you awakening to who you really are. There is nothing in this world that can keep you from knowing who you are. So just bear that in mind. The antidepressants are not stopping you from inquiry. They're not stopping you from coming to see yourself as you actually are. They can't do that. I would recommend, they can certainly distract you. They can do a lot, but I certainly, and again, I recommend you look for some alternatives. But they don't think that somehow you're not able to be fully spiritual or fully aware or fully awake because you're taking them. That is not true. It's a very cruel idea, and one you don't have to entertain for one moment. Mary Sykes, GP, if one is in a contracted state, will meditation help at the time of contraction? Would the contraction halt the meditation practice in any way? Beautiful. When you feel in that contracted state, right, if you start a meditation to try to get rid of the contracted state, the meditation will actually be creating an internal conflict, which will make the state worse, right? So what I recommend then is that the contracted feeling become the focus of your meditation. Put everything else out except that. And then notice as your attention goes towards the contraction, that the mind will engage, and there'll be stories about contraction. You say, I want out of here, I hate this, I don't like this to be here. You go, yes, fine. You just put it to the side and let yourself be fully present with the contraction. Now, you can see in that instance, there's no conflict. There's nothing there's nothing making this happen. At that point, you are present. Now, what you're present with isn't pleasant, right? But you are present. You have not detached from what's here and now in this moment. And thus, you are in the powerful position, because that's the healing energy. You are creating an internal environment of safety. And the contraction is always in a reaction to an environment of danger, whether that be coming from the outside or becoming generated from the inside. It can even be old traumas that are still active in the body and that sort of thing. It can't get in the way of the meditation practice if you're doing it right. It becomes the meditation practice. The moment the meditation practice becomes about getting to a state other than the one you're in, it's no longer meditation. It's avoidance, using the term meditation, usurping the term meditation to try to get out of what it doesn't like. That's how the ego does it. I don't like this, I want to get out of it. I think I want to meditate. That'll get me out of it, right? That's not meditation. Meditation is presence with whatever is here, even if it totally sucks. Does that help, Mary? Oh, it's after 3. Let's see here. Happy Christmas for all. Same to you, Evalda. Thank you, G. When you use the term surrender, something clicked. Perfect. Awakened INGF, love that name. Beloved Walsh. Hey, beloved Awakened INGF. Tonka, thank you, GP, for your insight. I do understand it very well. It's more like I do feel pain in my knee, but not in your knee. So my experience is different than yours. We are the one same consciousness. Yes. Yeah, and don't try to put it into some phrase where you can think into some idea where you can imagine yourself as consciousness having simultaneous experiences. You can't do it, because the moment that happens, the individual experience disappears, consciousness becomes a void, right? The void being just the blankness of infinite emptiness. So consciousness is Mary at this point. It's Mary experiencing GP at this point, and it's GP experiencing Mary, but it's all consciousness experiencing itself and loving itself. So beautiful. Thank you. I'm glad that's coming clear and understanding it and having an effect on your heart. It seemed that I felt a little opening for you. If I didn't, let me know, but it felt like that way anyway. Jürgen, love, thank you so much for your generosity. You're more than grateful, Jürgen. Do I say Jürgen or Jürgen? Simon Piano, nice name. If the truth is known, why does the person who doesn't exist, who knows the ultimate reality, is trying to teach others despite being an illusion? Could you tell something about suicide? I know I'm infinite and immortal, but why not to just to destroy the body? Why does the person who doesn't exist, does the person who doesn't exist, if the truth is known, why does the person who knows the ultimate reality is trying to teach others despite being an illusion? It's self-evident, really, which isn't to just, I'm not trying to be flippant here. Right? The only thing that knows anything is knowing. Only consciousness is conscious. So whatever it is you're looking at, right, it is consciousness that is seeing it. As I said, one of the examples, I don't know if you heard me say it, the examples was when you're having an experience, like you see a beautiful flower and there's a moment before thought starts and it's just pure experience. And then with practice, that space in which you can just stay with the presence and enjoy the moment and the narrative starts, grows. And in that space comes the opportunity, first off, to have a deeper experience of presence and a greater enjoyment of life, because now you're actually in life. But the other thing that emerges is the intelligence that is also consciousness. It's not blank, it's infinitely intelligence that discerns between truth and error. I mean, that's what's represented on the cross. There's a discernment between the past and the future and the now. There's a discernment that takes place. And so it is that capacity that allows us to see that there is no person, that it does not exist as an entity, but only a thought, and the only entity it possessed was the entity we gave it by believing in it and identifying with it. Therefore, we were acting out the part of the person by believing in that person, and therefore animating that which isn't really animated. It's like somebody playing a part in a play or a movie. The character they're playing is animated by who they really are, and the animated person does not exist. Right? Now, if we think that that's who we are, then all the problems of that character become my problems. But when I get that space and I see, oh, they don't, then those aren't my problems. They belong to the character. That's the distinguishing. That also allows you to distinguish where other levels of consciousness, for lack of a better word, are identified with that self, because you can see it clearly because you're not identified with it anymore, right? And so the bottom line to answer your question is, it is the ultimate reality that perceives ultimate reality. Nothing else can. There can't be some other reality perceiving the ultimate reality. Awareness, there can't be a second awareness perceiving the awareness. And this is the ultimate of non-duality. This is the Vedanta, or the end of knowledge. It is non-dual. It is self-realization. That is, awareness aware of itself as awareness. Now, your other question, can you tell me something about suicide? Knowing I'm infinite and immortal, but why not try to destroy the body? Well, why? Would be the question I ask. If you really know yourself as infinite and immortal, then the body becomes infinite and immortal, because it is the embodiment of you, or it is a momentary manifestation of the infinite and immortal. You're thinking of the body as something separate from the immortal, right? And often in non-dual teaching, you do separate first to say that you're not the body, in order to become clear that you are the undifferentiated consciousness. But if you leave it there, then you destroy the body or do anything you want to the body, it doesn't really matter. But that's only half the journey. And for Neo-Advaita and a lot of non-dual teaching, that's all they get to. There's a lot of traditional teachings that's all they get to as well. But that's only halfway there. That's the ultimate awakening. But now the ultimate awakening turns around and starts looking back outward again and starts inviting it all in to find out what is the actual makeup and nature of the experience I, pure consciousness, am having. And that's when you discover the great heart, You discover the great oneness. You discover that what you thought was the body isn't the body. It is consciousness aware of itself. It is consciousness. And as consciousness, you can't kill it. You can't destroy it. You can't get rid of it. So I'm answering the questions a little faster now because I am over time. So I hope that answers your question, Simon. You're part of the way there in that you're perceiving yourself as consciousness, immortal and infinite. Now turn back around again and say, well, then what is all this? What's all this stuff? What is all this, right? And don't just dismiss it as something that you get rid of because you're infinite and immortal, because it's still here, isn't it? You know, with awakening, everything, it's still here. Oh, well, what is it? Well, this is interesting. And now you become curious about experience. And this is where the word gets made flesh. This is where it becomes, you step out of the pure Vedanta and into the Tantra of life. David and Elaine, no question today, GP, but happy to listen and recognize that your words point to the beauty of truth, lies in its simplicity. It's the mind that seems compelled to overcomplicate it. Many thanks. You're very welcome. I was a little confused about that guy for a bit until I saw his line about pick up your Bible and start reading it, and I thought, okay, well, now it's all very clear, and that's when I removed him because I knew at this point there would be no discussion. He had an axe to grind in ideology, and there was no spaciousness there. There was no opening of consciousness. Paul Joseph, great answer, many thanks. Namaste. Good to you. I experience that I'm alone and that everybody is my projection. All right? Then go back to the source of that projection to look for the substance of the ones that you are projecting. You're still creating a separation between you and them. The source of that projection is the infinitude that's also projecting the you think you are. Just keep going deeper with it, Simon Piano. You are definitely on the right track. But I want to get it more into your heart to see that they are projections. When you see it as a mind projection, it's a projection. It becomes problematic. When you see it as consciousness aware of itself, it ceases to be a projection and becomes simply another aspect of consciousness. And that the dynamic aspect of consciousness and the essential aspect of consciousness become one, and there's no separation anymore. Sophie, dear G, I have recently come across Judith Blackstone, who writes about embodying the body. It resonates and releases the trauma of wanting to escape within the body as if to leave the outer one. You know, I'm finding more and more, thank you so much, Simon, you're very welcome. I'm finding more and more, it's very funny here. I'm finding more and more of my words appearing more and more people's mouths. More and more people talking about this reconciling with the trauma state, present, allowing and being with them. It's pretty fun. Not really my words because they just came to me. Nobody owns them, right? But I am seeing that this message is permeating more and more of spiritual teaching, psychological teaching, emotional teaching, and which is deepening it, and which is extremely gratifying to see. So you are finding that the genuine non-dual teaching is beginning to infiltrate a lot of teaching which are predominantly dualistic, but the people who are doing it are genuinely open-hearted people, and therefore are receptive to higher truth as it becomes revealed. Jesus spoke of it when he spoke of the kingdom of heaven as 3 measures, 3 units, or 3 grams of yeast, which the woman hid in the bread, which then leavened the whole bread. It's a beautiful way. That was the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven, the true non-dual truth, the reality of your being, the infinite allness of love, which is what he referred to as the kingdom of heaven. That pure presence is just the seed has been planted by Buddha, by Jesus, by countless sages, and it's borne fruit in me and you and others and the like, and it continues to bear. It continues to bear fruit, and it is leavening the whole. The entirety is being affected by it. So, all right, I made it through all the questions, I think. A great G, thank you. Mary says thank you. Yes, it helps. Good. Lisa says gracias, namaste. Okay, good. Well, thank you to you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for putting up with less of the sound. I will be doing the excerpts based on a much better recorder that I have aimed at me, so it'll sound better. So until next time, love you all. Namaste.